Good afternoon, Long Island, Connecticut, New York, and those listening internationally over the internet. This is Chris Arns, and your host of Iron Sharpens Iron, wishing you all a happy Monday and an absolutely gorgeous fall-like day here on Long Island in the dead of winter. And we're going to be discussing a very important theme today. Did the Bible misquote Jesus? Well, that was the topic of a recent debate with Dr. James R. White, founder and director of Alpha and Omega Ministries, a theologically reformed Christian apologetics organization based in Phoenix, and his opponent, Bart Ehrman. And we are going to be addressing that debate, and we're going to be asking Dr. White if he believes he succeeded in achieving his stated goals during this debate. If you'd like to join us on the air with a question for Dr. James R. White on this debate, did the Bible misquote Jesus? Our number is 631-321-WNYG, 631-321-WNYG. Want to pick up the phone during the station break, call your family, friends, and loved ones, perhaps especially if they follow the ministry of Dr. James R. White. Perhaps they are blessed by his writings, by his public debates and conferences and so on. Or perhaps they are theological opponents of Dr. White, and they feel very passionately that he is in great error. Call either one of those folks that you know, people in either one of those categories, and have them tune into 1440 AM on the dial if they live on Long Island, the Bronx, Yonkers, the Jersey Shore, the coast of Connecticut. But they can hear this program anywhere at all on the planet Earth via live streaming at WNYGSpiritofNY.com. That's WNYGSpiritofNY.com, or at sharpens.org, SHARPENS.org. We look forward to hearing from you and your phone calls for James R. White at 631-321-WNYG. Don't go away. Welcome back. This is Chris Arnzen, your host of Iron Sharpens Iron. If you just tuned us in, our guest today is Dr. James R. White, the founder and director of Alpha and Omega Ministries, a theologically reformed Christian apologetics organization based in Phoenix, Arizona. And we are going to be discussing a debate he recently had. In fact, it was on January 21st in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Dr. White had a public moderated debate with Bart D. Ehrman, the James A. Gray Distinguished Professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and the author of Misquoting Jesus, which is an overview of the changes found in the surviving copies of the New Testament and the scribes who produced them. And the debate was on the theme, did the Bible misquote Jesus? And Ehrman believes that if God had put forth the effort to inspire the words of the Bible, then he would have surely preserved those words. According to Ehrman, God simply would not have allowed any textual variation to exist in the transmission of the New Testament if he had inspired it in the first place. And we're going to be going over all of Dr. White's goals that he had in this debate to see, in his opinion, whether he succeeded or not. And it's great to have you back on the program once again, Dr. James R. White.
Well, I tell you, Chris, it is such a privilege to be on with the golden voice of Long Island. Just having this opportunity. Debating Ehrman's nothing compared to being on with Chris Arns. Everywhere I go, people say, "Man, I heard you on Iron Sharpens Iron." So it's an honor.
And if you heard me stammering and misplacing my words in the beginning, it's because my co-host Jim Kappa was turning my volume down on my headphones, thinking he was using his own volume. And as you now know, or my guest host today is Pastor Jim Capo of Massapequa Church of God on Long Island, who has had Dr. James White speak at his church on more than several occasions, and it's great to have you back in the studio.
It's great to be here, Chris. It's great to talk to you, Dr. White.
It's great to hear from you, Jim. I think I've spoken there, about 187 times now?
Yeah, just about.
And just to let our listeners know a little bit more about Dr. White, most of them know who he is, but he's the author of more than 20 books, and that's probably even an outdated number. even though the word more is before it, but including the King James only controversy, the Forgotten Trinity, the Potter's Freedom, defense of the Reformation, and rebuttal of Norman Geisler's Chosen but Free, Dangerous Airwaves, Harold Camping refuted and Christ Church defended, and the God who justifies. And he is an accomplished debater, having engaged in more than 50 moderated public debates with leading proponents of Roman Catholicism, liberal Protestantism, homosexual activism, oneness Pentecostalism, Islam, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, in addition to having collegial in-house debates with friends and brothers in Christ over issues ranging from the biblical subjects of baptism to the doctrines of Calvinism. He's an elder of the Phoenix Reformed Baptist Church and has been married to Kelly for more than 22 years and has 2 children, Joshua and Summer. You're laughing because it's really outdated stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, the debates are about 75
wow.
now.
Wow.
Married for over 26 years. And I've even got a daughter-in-law now, for that matter. So.
Wow, man. Well, this is actually written on parchment, this what I'm reading here.
Codex Arnstentenius, yes,
Okay, well, first of all, I think it'd be wise to let our listeners know who are totally unfamiliar with the name Bart D. Ehrman. Who is he? I understand at one time he was an evangelical, but totally abandoned that.
Yeah, you know, the amazing thing is Bart Ehrman was nominated as Man of the Year for writing his book, Misquoting Jesus, which is a New York Times bestseller. And the amazing thing is there's almost nothing in that book other than his conclusion, which basically is, well, if we don't have the originals, the inspiration can't be true. That was in any way, shape, or form new. Even he admits the vast majority of what he says in there has been well known to biblical scholars for a long, long time. And in fact, on most of the variants where we're both talking about the same thing, my book, The King James Only Controversy, goes into more depth than Dr. Ehrman does in his book. And so why is he nominated as Man of the Year and I didn't, for some reason, get that nomination? Real simple. I'm still a Christian. And Bart Ehrman, his fame as far as writing these kinds of books has come is due to the fact that he is a graduate of Moody Bible Institute, Wheaton College, and Princeton Theological Seminary. And somewhere in that journey, actually according to a book he wrote last year called God's Problem, it was a little bit after his seminary period, he, quote-unquote, lost his faith. Now, part of that process was that he abandoned what we would describe as an orthodox view of Scripture due to his study of textual variation. But according to him, that's not what caused him to lose his faith. According to his own words, it was the problem of evil that eventually caused him to become what he describes himself now as a happy agnostic. But it is that background that has caused him to be a favorite of NPR and the various news outlets. He's been on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and it's just amazing how many people, if you listen to The New Atheist, if you listen to Christopher Hitchens, if you listen to Dawkins, they'll be quoting Ehrman as their go-to guy for the final decision that the New Testament is unreliable and untrustworthy.
So what do you believe, in fact, perhaps he has stated it either in writing or in public audibly, what is his passion in life to let Christians know that the book they're relying on is unreliable and shouldn't be trusted as the Word of God? If he's an agnostic, why not just pack up, leave the Christians alone, and ignore them? You know,
that's a very interesting question, because Ehrman would never say that Ehrman would say he doesn't really wouldn't care what people think along those lines. You can believe what you want, because for him, as in so many in the academy today, theology is just a matter of opinion anyway. As long as theology isn't allowed to touch truth or history or anything else, as long as it's just kept out there in the realm of myth or opinion, then you can believe in it, whatever you want. It's when Christians actually claim that this is true that he wants them really to know the whole story, in essence. And so he teaches, these large classes full of young students at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I can just imagine that his holster has many notches in it of former Christians that he's created who have walked into that class completely unprepared for the deluge of skepticism that would be coming their direction, unfortunately. And so he didn't strike me as an overly happy agnostic, to be perfectly honest with you. He struck me as a somewhat miserable agnostic in the sense that I didn't sense any, tremendous joy in Dr. Ehrman. But be it as it may, clearly he does have, even though he denies this, I think that the documentation is clear. See, we, for over a year, had advertised the debate with the subtitle, "Does Textual Variation Preclude the Possibility of Inspiration?" Because that's his whole assertion. His assertion basically is that if we don't possess the originals or a photocopy thereof, which obviously is a little bit tough given that a photocopier was invented in 1949, then there can be no such thing as inspiration. And he normally doesn't put it quite that bluntly. He certainly did in the debate, thankfully. But he, in essence, states that there are places in the New Testament where we don't know what the original was. And thankfully in the debate, I was able to bring out exactly what he's saying there. And that he is not really saying that the originals have disappeared. When I asked him to give us any examples where that might have happened, he could only give us one, and it was wild conjecture that has no documentation behind it whatsoever. But what he is saying is, well, if there's any variation at all, and of course anything that's passed down in handwriting, there's going to be variation between manuscripts, then we can't know with absolute photographic modern certainty. And therefore we don't know what the New Testament originally said. Now the irony is he also, in the same debate, said the New Testament is the earliest attested manuscript of all of the ancient world. So in comparison to any other document of the ancient world, the New Testament has the earliest, widest attestation. He said that openly, he admitted that. But what that then means is you have to embrace his radical skepticism of all ancient documents. So in other words, Suetonius, Tacitus, Pliny, the people that we rely on for the vast majority of our knowledge of ancient Rome, we really don't know anything they had to say. And Theodotus and all the Greek historians, we really don't know what happened in history at all. We just can't know. And that kind of radical skepticism is not something that scholarship has promoted or even believed in, but that is the result of Ehrman's rather radical position.
Mm-hmm. And before we go into some of the main goals that you had in mind in the debate, would Ehrman share the opinion with some of the more well-known atheists? I know that he is an agnostic, but would he share the opinion with some of the more well-known atheists who actually are frustrated with agnostics? They think they should, get off that ship of limbo and get on the program with atheism. But would he agree that if one is a Christian believing in the inerrancy of Scripture, that one would be an evil person, or would that very well could likely and would most likely lead to evil?
I don't think that he would go there. I did not get that feeling from reading his book on the problem of evil. I think that he was a student of Bruce Metzger. That's one of the main reasons that he has the reputation that he does in textual critical circles. Even though he has come to very opposite conclusions of his own mentor on many topics. And so he has had respect, anyways, for people who believe in the deity of Christ or the resurrection, or who are Christians in some sense. And so I don't think he would go to that extreme. But he sort of does avoid getting into some of those areas as far as the radical atheist and stuff. And when I pointed out how atheists and Muslims both utilize his writings, he basically said, hey, look, I can't control what people do with what I write. I write it, they read it, that's all there is to it. And of course my criticism was, yeah, but when you do not clarify what you're saying, when you communicate things to people in an unfair or imbalanced fashion, and then they take that and run with that, I think that does come back upon you in some sense.
Mm-hmm. All right, one of the primary goals you had in this debate was to demonstrate that one who holds to the highest view of Scripture and its inspiration could look at the very same data and still present a strong, compelling case for the preservation of the text over time, a text of Scripture over time.
Right.
How do you believe that was accomplished in the debate?
Well, yeah, the funny thing is, I spent more time preparing for this debate than any other debate I've ever done. There's no question about that. I might have spent close the same amount of time in preparing to debate John Dominic Crossan, but probably not as much as I did for this one, because I felt it was probably the most important debate I've done. The reason for this is that Ehrman normally is factually correct in what he says. Most people will not fault him for having the wrong facts. I mean, I found a couple little, very small, minor things, as I think anyone would who's looking very carefully at anyone's work, could pick on this, pick on that. But generally, his facts are accurate. It's the spin that he places upon it and the conclusions and the things that he ignores that are the real issue. And so I had listened to basically everything that Bart Ehrman has recorded. I had listened to the entirety of a class that he teaches on the New Testament. I listened to all of his debates, radio programs, interviews, and not just listened to them once, but sometimes 6, 7 times each. And so when he gave his opening presentation, I literally could have given the exact same presentation in the exact same order, with the exact same illustrations and the exact same jokes in the exact same words, because he gives the exact same presentation all the time. And so since I knew what his presentation was going to be, then since I went second, I had the opportunity of not only making my presentation, but doing it with his exact position in mind. And I think that as far as being able to demonstrate that you can look at the textual data, you can know the nature of the variants and the manuscripts and everything else, and yet come to the exact opposite conclusion, not focus upon the differences, but marvel at the fact that a 1.3 million page tradition, that's how many pages of New Testament text we have, handwritten all that time, could come to us with such tremendous accuracy. Yeah, I think that was accomplished very clearly.
We have to go to a break. If you'd like to join us on the air with a question for Dr. James R. White regarding his recent debate with Bart Ehrman, did the Bible misquote Jesus? Our number is 631-321-WNYG. 631-321-WNYG. Whether you agree with Dr. White, perhaps you agree with Dr. Ehrman, perhaps you're not sure. Perhaps you're not even a Christian. We would love to hear from you. 631-321-WNYG, and you may remain anonymous if it makes you feel more comfortable. 631-321-WNYG. Don't go away. We'll be right back with Dr. James R. White of Alpha and Omega Ministries. Welcome back. This is Chris Arnzen of Iron Sharpens Iron. Our guest today, if you've just tuned us in, is Dr. James R. White of Alpha and Omega Ministries. We are discussing his recent debate with Bart D. Ehrman on the theme, Did the Bible Misquote Jesus? My co-host in studio, Pastor Jim Cappo of the Massapequa Church of God, has a question.
Yes, Dr. White, exactly how much of the New Testament, or what percentage of the New Testament would you say falls under the heading that we don't know with absolute certainty what the original said?
Well, let me give you some numbers, and so we can start at the bad end, which is what Dr. Ehrman likes to present, and then move from there. Because the main reason that Ehrman has gotten so much mileage out of this, let's face it, is the vast majority of Christians don't know anything about this field at all. The vast majority of Christians read those little notes in the margin of their Bibles that says, some manuscripts say this, and they go, someday I'm going to have to ask Pastor Bob about that, or in your case, Pastor Jim about that. And let's face it, a lot of Pastor Jims start sweating a little bit when someone does ask about that, because it is a challenging area, and so he gets away with a lot. For example, he loves to say, I love to tell my students that there are more textual variants in the manuscripts than there are words in the New Testament. Now, when you say that, you're like, wow, that sounds really, really bad, until you start breaking that down a little bit. The modern critical edition of the New Testament has 138,020 words in it, approximately 140,000. Interestingly enough, just for your information, the average English New Testament has 250,000 words in it, which tells you that Greek is a significantly more economical and accurate language than English is, since we have to use almost twice as many words to say the same things. But anyway, 138,000 words. There's about 400,000 variants. That's almost 3 to 1. Sounds bad, sounds terrible, until you start taking that apart. point one is that 99% of those variants do not impact the meaning of the text. They are differences in word order, spelling. Remember that spelling, as we have it today, and I hope no school children are listening right now, but the idea of spelling, especially names, in the exact same way is a pretty modern idea. I mean, even as late as Wycliffe. In Wycliffe's writings, you can find his own name spelled by his own hand 12 different ways. So, John, for example, do you spell it with one new or two news? Who knew? I learned that from Chris. Anyway, there is also something called immovable new, where, like in English, you say a ball or an apple. They had the similar thing in Greek, and beginning Greek students just go insane with that kind of stuff. But the scribes struggle with a lot of that stuff. Most of that you can't even translate into English to begin with. And so you really have about 1% of the text where there is a meaningful variation that can be translated into English that would change the meaning of the text. Then you have to start dividing that out with those readings that couldn't possibly have been original in the first place, that they're maybe found just in a 14th century manuscript or something like that. That cuts it down even farther. And then you have to cut those down into what were clearly and obviously scribal errors, where a scribe skipped a line or he skipped from one word to another word because they had similar endings and things like that. When you dig it all down to that point, you probably have about half of 1% of the text where there is what would be called a serious textual variant. However, this is one of the main areas where Dr. Ehrman and I disagreed strongly, and that is that at least up until the modern period, and the modern period being past 15 years or so, the people like Dr. Kurt Ahland, who the Nestle Ahland text is the modern Greek text, so he has really been the premier textual critical scholar for a long, long period of time, asserts in his book that the New Testament demonstrates what's called tenacity. That is, once a reading appears in the manuscripts, it stays in the manuscripts. Even if it's silly, even if it doesn't make any sense, it'll still leave evidence that it has existed in the manuscripts. Now, that may sound bad to us, that even a mistake will continue on, but it's the flip side of that that's most important. Because if mistakes stay, that means the original has stayed as well. So when I'm looking at a variant and there's two possible readings, I can be certain that one of those two is the original. It's not option 3, which is none of the above. And so, as one person has likened it, and I think it's a good likening, it's like having a jigsaw puzzle with 1,000 pieces in it, but you have 1,010 pieces in the box. Over time, the manuscripts have picked up readings, not lost readings. It's not like we only have 95% of it, or 90% of it, or something else. We have everything that the apostles wrote. We have everything that John wrote. We have everything that Mark wrote, et cetera, et cetera. There is, in a small percentage of places, a need to do serious examination of the manuscripts themselves to determine which one it is. And I'm all for doing what almost all modern translations do, and that is put it out there. That's why you have notes in the New American Standard, the ESV, and the NIV, where it'll say ancient manuscripts say X, Y, and Z. Educate people about the fact that the two largest textual variants in the New Testament are John 7:53 through 8:11, which is the story of the woman caught in adultery, and the longer ending of Mark 16:9 through 20, both 12 verses long. Dr. Ehrman makes a good living off of shocking Christians in pointing out that those are not original. Well, that's not something that people haven't known. It's just that, unfortunately, we don't do a real good job of educating people in our churches about the history of the New Testament and dealing with tough issues like the text of the New Testament itself.
Jim, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier your book, The King James Only Controversy, and it seems that the ardent King James only advocates, they would tend to hold the same position as Bart Ehrman, that if we allow for variance, then somehow we're undermining inspiration.
Exactly.
And I think I heard you say once, or I heard you explain once, correct me if I'm wrong, that their insistence on, one authoritative text that we can point to with absolute certainty actually undermines the idea of inspiration.
Yes.
How is that?
Yeah, excellent question. Thanks for bringing him along today, Chris. That's great. I can just see the two of you sitting there in the studio right now. I sort of miss being there, though I don't miss the fact that it's 75.6 degrees outside here right now. So
actually, it's not bad today. It's about almost 50.
It's a very, very, very important question, though, because I fully understand the desire of, for example, the King James only advocate to have absolutely no questions. This is, the final version right here. I don't have to do any study. Don't have to think about this. This is it. It's written in stone. The problem is, of course, the English language didn't exist when the Bible was inspired, and so it has to be translated. And there's this messy thing about history. God keeps getting involved in history, and it tends to get really messy when he does so. And so I understand the desire. It's the same desire the Muslims have. And I brought this out in the debate, and Dr. Ehrman was quite offended that I did, but it's the same perspective that the Muslims have. We need to have one version of the Quran, and everything else needs to be edited to match this one version, which is exactly what they did with the Uthmanic revision of the Quran. And so I understand that desire, but here's the problem. You see, when Uthman made his one version of the Quran, which has given the Muslims their nice transmission of the text over time, so on and so forth, he burned all the preceding materials he used to make his edited version. And as such, now you have to move the locus of inspiration from Muhammad to Uthman. Uthman's decisions, or the committee that he appointed's decisions, have to be as inspired as the original because you've destroyed the information that you used to create that. And it's that controlling authority idea that is normally behind most accusations that the New Testament has been changed. How many times have we heard cultists and other religions saying, well, yeah, the Bible used to teach reincarnation, but they took it out of the Council of Constantinople, and Dan Brown made how many millions and millions and millions of dollars of the Da Vinci Code telling people that that's what Constantine did, that he had changed the Bible, and blah, 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 blah. And all of those theories require that somehow the text be changeable. But that's exactly what you don't have with the New Testament. The New Testament manuscripts from the very beginning, even before there is a New Testament, in other words, when the books still exist as individual letters, as individual books, are copied explosively throughout the period of persecution prior to the peace of the church in 313. They're distributed all over the place. No one could ever control the content of the New Testament. And without that kind of central control, all theories about corruption of the text, changing of the text, insertion of the resurrection of the deity of Christ, the Trinity, or taking out reincarnation, whatever else, all those theories collapse when you simply look at what we have in the New Testament manuscript tradition itself. And so I think it is far more important that we are able to say there is not a ghost of a chance that all of those accusations took place. That's far more important than having to deal with 0.5% of the text as far as textual variations, due to the fact that the early Christians who were copying these things were not professional scribes. In fact, they were copying these texts sometimes at the risk of their own life. Because, as we know, the Romans were trying to destroy the Christian scriptures. The morning of the debate, in fact, I purchased a scholarly journal online from Johns Hopkins where there was this article about some papyri that had been translated, and one of them was about a church that had been disbanded by the Romans during the final imperial persecution toward the end of the 3rd century, and they had taken from the church 38 manuscripts, 38 texts, including one large codex. Now, we don't know necessarily what was in them, but they were probably New Testament books. They were destroyed. And that was just one church. How many churches were destroyed during that period of time? So the fact that the text even survived that, but then has come to us with this tremendously deep and broad manuscript tradition that is better than anything else in antiquity, I think is absolutely miraculous.
Just briefly, why would Bart Ehrman, if he's an agnostic, why would he care if he brought up the Quran? Because he doesn't believe that that's inspired either. Political
correctness. I was simply... He's the head of the Department of Religious Studies at a very liberal university, and the only thing I can figure out is that logically he had made it very clear: if there are textual variants in a manuscript tradition, then that book cannot have been inspired. So I said, so that would mean the Quran misquotes Muhammad, right? He had agreed that history misquotes Suetonius, history misquotes Tacitus. Those don't get him in trouble. But as soon as I said the Quran misquotes Muhammad, well, I'm not taking any position on that, and I'm offended that you're likening me to a Muslim, and people are looking at him going, what? He refused to apply the logical conclusions of his own position to the Quran simply for political correctness reasons.
And we have to go to a break right now. If you'd like to join us on the air with a question for Dr. James R. White regarding the recent debate with Bart Ehrman on the theme, Did the Bible Misquote Jesus? Our number is 631-321-WNYG, 631-321-WNYG. Whether you agree or disagree, we look forward to hearing from you after these messages. Welcome back. This is Chris Arns, and if you just tuned us in, our guest today is Dr. James R. White, founder and director of Alpha and Omega Ministries, a well-known scholar, author, debater. And we are discussing the debate he just recently had. In fact, it was on January 21st, 2009 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, with Bart D. Ehrman. And Bart D. Ehrman is the author of the very well-known book, Misquoting Jesus, which has caused quite a controversy. And this is an overview. This book is an overview of the changes found in the surviving copies of the New Testament and of the scribes who produced them. And this debate was on the theme, Did the Bible Misquote Jesus? One of your goals was to expose the presuppositional nature of Ehrman's insistence that we must possess the originals for inspiration to be true. Now, he has this as a fact embedded and engraved in his mind before any evidence is presented to him.
Yeah, and I think people need to understand that. When I first heard him make the assertion that if God had inspired the text, then in essence he would have made sure that there was never a variant, I started thinking, how would that work? I mean, the only logical way I could think of having that work would be that you burn the text into a rock, and then you kill anybody that gets close enough to touch the rock. And then that's how you do it. I mean, that would be the only way to do it. The only other way to do it would be, and I told the story in an article I wrote yesterday. It's posted on my blog and also on the American Vision website. Poor little Bob the scribe, Brother Bob gets up one morning and he's not feeling real well. He's getting older. His eyesight's failing. They don't have glasses in the 12th century, and so he's starting to copy the Gospel of Mark, and he misreads a word. He's about to miscopy it. What's God going to do according to Ehrman's postulate? Does Bob the scribe disappear in a flash of light? Does an angel appear and scream at him and go, "No, Bob, spell it right"? Does Bob get taken over by a spirit and start doing automatic writing like an IBM Selectric scribe or something? I mean, how is this supposed to work? And you can't get, I did ask Dr. Ehrman. It didn't come out in the debate. He sort of avoided it, but I asked him on the phone when we were discussing this before the debate about a month beforehand. I said, well, I really think this needs to be addressed because this is a pretty unusual perspective. I mean, how is this supposed to work? He said, well, the medieval Jews copied theirs accurately. Well, the reality is there are variants even in the Jewish Masoretic text, but their situation was completely different than that of the early church. They had a controlled text. It was within one community. They weren't trying to spread this message around the world. The fact of the matter is his entire position is presuppositionally derived to preclude the possibility that the New Testament is what the New Testament claims to be. That's just all there is to it. It's not the conclusion of his study. It's the starting point. It's the lens through which he looks at all the data. And that's why believing Christian scholars can look at the exact same manuscripts, the exact same information, and come to completely different conclusions. But he, as an apostate, and that is technically what he is, and that's not an insult in any way, shape, or form, he markets himself that way. He stood up there in the debate and said, I used to believe everything exactly like he believes it, which I didn't think was really true because he hadn't taken the time to read anything I had ever written, so he didn't really understand some of the positions I was taking, but he markets himself in that way. And I really think that it is a part of the convert complex. It's part of the mechanism that allows him to suppress that knowledge of God that God has placed within all of us, and the act of apostasy that he has undergone over the past number of years.
Very briefly, as long as I've known you, I believe that you have identified yourself as a presuppositionalist in your approach to theological debate in defending the truths. There was some critique recently, very recently after the debate, that you were presenting more of an evidentialist presentation. If you could comment on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. A fellow by the name of Joel McDermott from American Vision was at the debate. In fact, I just posted it a couple hours ago. Actually, I think I'll be posting it tomorrow. Now that I'll take that back. I uploaded it to the site, but I haven't posted it yet, of a picture of Joel and I at the debate, interestingly enough. I really didn't understand his review of the debate. It was confused. And he did say that what the debate demonstrated was the limitations of evidentialist apologetics. Well, I'm not an evidentialist, and the debate wasn't on the subject of the existence of God or something like that. So I fail to see really how that comes across. I am a presuppositionalist. I think you have to deal with the presuppositions that natural man brings to the discussion of the existence of God and his own creatureliness. And I would love to discuss the contrast in worldview that Dr. Ehrman brings to the table, but I can guarantee you he would have absolutely positively no interest in that whatsoever. His objection to even having the subtitle, which we had for a year and had been a part of the original agreement, does textual variation preclude the possibility of inspiration, was that, look, he says, I'm a historical scholar. I'm a historian, not a theologian. And if you've listened to his debates with William Lane Craig, Mike Licona, and others, you know that he makes a complete distinction between being what history can say and any relevance of the existence of God. History cannot make any comment one way or the other about the existence of God. And, of course, that's an atheistic view of history. It renders history a mishmash of disconnected things, and it pretty much precludes any view of Christian history, but he insists on that. So I don't think there would be any way to even get him to agree to discuss his agnosticism or anything like that. I suppose since he wrote God's Problem, you could approach him from that perspective and say, hey, look, we have the issue of evil, and can you really even discuss evil without borrowing from my worldview? I mean, I suppose if you discuss that book, that might be a possible direction to go, but that wasn't our discussion. Our discussion was supposed to be on the essence of the New Testament textual manuscript tradition and whether we can or cannot trust it. And so I really didn't know where some of that criticism was coming from.
Now, obviously, presuppositionalists use evidence when they argue.
Yeah.
It's just that Romans, there are certain truths that God basically implants in the heart of everyone, but men in their evil suppress that truth, correct?
Oh, exactly. I mean, the natural man knows God exists. He is actively suppressing that knowledge, and that displays itself and exemplifies itself in all sorts of different ways. It can be in atheism, agnosticism, various forms of skepticism, or it can be very religious. The ways in which man manifests his rebellion against God can be many.
Mm-hmm. And you intended in this debate to reverse Ehrman's spin on the state of the text, which involved putting a context to his constant repetition of the claim there are more variants than there are words in the New Testament. Well, you did touch on that already, but anything further to add?
Yeah, well, I think it's important because you remember my daughter Summer ran into sort of a little small Ehrman clone when she first went to college, and he cited Bart Ehrman. In fact, I managed to get his name into the debate in my closing statement just for the fun of it. But there's all sorts of guys like Lee Carter out there who will just throw this stuff out at freshman college students just in a blatant attack upon Christianity. And a Christian who is aware of the facts and understands where the New Testament came from and understands the existence of textual variation and why we can be so certain of the text and what the practice of it is. I wish we could do it. It's very difficult to do over radio or voice, but when I give my lecture on New Testament reliability, I like to go through some variants and show people, here's the evidence, here's why it looks so complex, but let's look at what it really would have looked like in the original what's called unsealed text in the New Testament. And when they can actually see what the two readings are, and in one of the ones I like to go through is 1 Timothy 3:16, whether it says, he who was manifest in the flesh, or God was manifest in the flesh. When up on the screen you can see what those two words are and how absolutely similar they are to one another, then you start understanding, oh, of course, what the scribes are copying. Wow, there isn't anything about conspiracy here or anything. Very easy to see how this arose, and it really helps people. I've actually heard gasps from the audience when I put that particular slide up, because it so clarifies the issue and takes away so much of the conspiracy idea. And so it really is important to educate people, because if we present it to them in the proper context with all the information, it's like an inoculation. We're sending our young people into the universities and out into this world without the foundation they need to be prepared for the onslaught that's going to hit them. And once the doubts have been planted, once the damage has been done, then they're coming back to us, and we're trying to do repair work rather than having them had an opportunity to bear witness and to see the bias of those who oppose the faith and things like that. We've lost that opportunity. Now we're just trying to do repair work, and that's not the way to do it.
One of the other stated goals was to present a strong case for the providential preservation of the text through the explosion of early manuscripts and the lack of editorial control, in contrast with the Islamic theory of preservation. I think you touched on that also with the Old Covenant, but if you could expand on that.
Yeah, that's the main point I was trying to present, is that the question is not if God has preserved the text, it is how God preserved the text. And you either have to have the Ehrman, King James only Islamic viewpoint, which says God has to preserve the text via photographic means, or you can look at history and go, well, how did God do it in the case of the New Testament? And he did it by spreading this gospel all across the known world. And these Christians wanted other Christians to have the scriptures. And so they copied and copied and copied, oftentimes at the risk of their life, making these contraband scriptures. And that means that there's never been an opportunity for that kind of controlled editing and changing of the text. The result, however, is you have the textual variants due to copyist errors, but that's a very small price to pay for being able to say that it is utterly impossible that when Shirley MacLaine runs around saying that reincarnation has been taken out of the Bible, that's just baloney. You can demonstrate that it was never a part of the scriptures in the first place. There was no church council that had control over the text of the Bible to be able to change things, edit things, so on and so forth. And so he really didn't have much of a response to that, because, again, while I had purchased all of his books, including his scholarly compilation from Brill over in the Netherlands, which in and of itself, just one volume, was $167. While I had spent all that time and effort to make sure that I would fully understand where he's coming from, when he was being driven to the hotel, he asked where I lived. So he hadn't even so much as Googled my name, let alone read any of my books, listened to any of my debates, anything like that. Because liberals, just like John Shelby Spong, Barry Lynn, you've witnessed it yourself, Chris, they don't believe that anyone who believes what we believe has anything new to say at all. They don't have to study what we say. They don't have to prepare. Barry Lynn and John Shelby Spong showed up for their debates without Bibles, for crying out loud. At least he had a New Testament with him. Got to give him credit for that. But no, they don't feel like they have any requirement whatsoever to find out where we're coming from. And so he struggled to provide any kind of meaningful response to my position because he just wasn't familiar with it. In fact, we wasted time during his cross-examination because he didn't understand what I was saying. And it did demonstrate to me the fact that he's pretty focused upon just his very narrow area of expertise, because when you actually start talking about other things, he got completely lost at that point.
We're going to be going to our final break right now, and this is your final opportunity to call Dr. White on this subject. Our number is 631-321-WNYG, 631-321-WNYG, 631-321-WNYG. We'll be right back with Dr. James R. White and his discussion of the Bart Ehrman debate on the theme, Did the Bible Misquote Jesus? Welcome back. Tony in Holbrook, Long Island. You have a question for Dr. James White. Hello, Tony in Holbrook, Long Island.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Dr. White, pleasure to talk with you. Just a general question, kind of. I know you do debates in a lot of the colleges, and a lot of them are liberal colleges. My question is, by the time you are finished with the debate, do you see a different response from the audience as when you had started the debate? And I'll take that off the air. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
It really depends on the on the context. I mean, this particular debate, I would say primarily we had evangelicals in the audience, and so I didn't really say anything there. But I did do a debate at a very liberal institution in the San Francisco area on gay marriage last year. That was interesting. They stayed rather respectful. I haven't had any problems along those lines. It's nice to talk to folks afterwards and find out if you've been able to communicate your position. But most of the time when I'm doing debate anymore, we make sure that it's being videotaped and audio taped so that it can have an impact outside of just that particular room or that particular hour, that particular day. I think that's very, very important. Some of the debates we did many, many years ago are still having an impact to this day. So, and that's only been added to by the fact that the internet allows us to get this information out to a much wider audience than we ever could before.
And just like it would be erroneous or incorrect to criticize the relevance of preaching because you don't have 5,000 people who come to Christ after a sermon is preached, just because you may not see massive conversions or changes of mind at a debate doesn't mean that they're irrelevant or unimportant, correct?
No, I think one of the major things that debate allows is to demonstrate that, for example, this debate is to demonstrate that you can have someone examining the exact same information and stand toe-to-toe with someone like Bart Ehrman and say, no, it doesn't lead me to that conclusion. In fact, here's evidence that it is quite commensurate with Christian belief, and here's the evidence that substantiates that. I think that's very encouraging to Christians, even if a skeptic thinks otherwise.
And by the way, I didn't want to insinuate that our caller was posing the view that I was.
No.
Jim Cappo.
Yeah, Dr. White, I was struck before by the contrast you presented in the preparation that each of you underwent for the debate. And wouldn't you say, well, I know, and you've mentioned this in the past, when you prepare so thoroughly, it's not only for the purpose of being able to refute your opponent in the debate, but you really do strive to accurately reflect his views. And I find that whether it be in politics or religion, liberals, or whatever you want to call them, they just don't care about accurately reflecting the views of their opponent. They couldn't care less. Would you say that's true?
There's only one person that I would say that he did show a concern for at least accurately representing me once we met. He hadn't done any study about me before we met, but when I debated John Dominic Crossan, it was clear to me that at least as we debated, he was trying to understand me and trying to accurately represent what I was saying. But in general, that is the unusual attitude on the part of liberals. They've really, my experience is getting a little bit wide now, is that they just don't believe that we have anything more to offer than the most basic softball level stuff that you'd see on hardball, where you get 13 seconds to speak before you get cut off. There's no depth or anything like that. So yeah, obviously for me, I have to do that because I have a higher standard. I believe in truth. I follow him who is the truth. So what I have to do for a debate is already determined by my profession of faith.
Finally, your goal was to expose the radical skepticism of Bart Ehrman's position, which leads to an abandonment of any meaningful knowledge of history itself, and you needed to contrast Ehrman's postmodernism with the viewpoints of the past. If you could explain.
No question about it. I mean, when I got him to directly state that the New Testament has the earliest attestation of any ancient document, and he says, but then you say that means we can't trust any ancient document. That's right. Yep, that's right. So he admitted it, and so all the other historians, the great names of the past, like Tischendorf and Westcott and Hort and B.B. Warfield and Gordon Fee and Bruce Metzger. The irony is that Metzger and Ehrman edited the 4th edition of Metzger's book, And I didn't first point this out. Dan Wallace did, but this is the title of the book: The Text of the New Testament, Its Transmission, Corruption, and Restoration. As Dan Wallace has pointed out, now that Ehrman's around, they should drop the last word. It should just be the text of the New Testament, its transmission, corruption. Because he doesn't believe in its restoration. He doesn't believe that it can be restored, unlike Bruce Metzger before him. So he does this postmodernism of himself, D.C. Parker, Eldon Epp, who are taking this study away from establishing the text of the New Testament to something else, is really a troubling thing, and people need to be aware of it.
Dr. White, it has been such a great honor once again to have you on this program. I eagerly look forward to having you back as quickly as possible on Iron Sharpens Iron.
Well, it's always good to be with you guys. Appreciate it, and enjoy your nice cold weather back there.
And by the way, the MP3 of the debate is now available to be purchased at the Alpha and Omega website, which is aomin.org, AOMIN, which stands for Alpha and Omega Ministries, aomin.org. There's not only the audio, but it also contains Dr. White's overhead presentation in a QuickTime video. So just write that down, aomin.org, if you'd like to purchase the MP3 to this entire debate with Dr. Bart Ehrman on Did the Bible Misquote Jesus? And Pastor Jim Capo, your contact information for Massapequa Church of God.
Yes, that you can reach us at 516-799-2421, 516-799-2421.
By the way, the first two callers right after the program, actually the first one caller, the first caller after the program will receive 2 free tickets to the Long Island Citizens for Community Values fundraising banquet. This is a $70 value. I'm sorry, I called it a banquet. This is an evening of elegance. It's a musical presentation featuring classically trained musicians as well as local artists. And this is Friday, February 6th. This Friday at 7 p.m. at the Huntington Hilton. This is to help raise funds for a wonderful organization, Long Island Citizens for Community Values, which helps to clean up residential areas from pornographic movie theaters and adult bookstores, and helps educate parents and their children about the dangers of internet pornography and pedophile predators. This pair of tickets is yours if you're the first caller after the program. $70 value. Give us a call at 631-321-WNYG, 631-321-WNYG. And by the way, this pair of tickets is compliments of Pastor Jim Capo and the Massapequa Church of God, Massapequa, Long Island, who purchased them for this purpose to share with the listeners of Iron Sharpens Iron. He already has his own tickets, and he will be attending with his wife and other folks from his church. But these tickets are for you as his gift. 631-321-WNYG. I hope that you all always remember for the rest of your lives that Jesus Christ is a far, far greater Savior than you are a sinner. God bless.